When you look at the most popular Disney movies or animated movies that Disney pioneered the most, you notice that they usually tend to involve animals, starting out with films like Bambi to fully focus on that kingdom, and then going ahead to do more like the Aristocats, Robin Hood, and of course the most popular of them all being The Lion King, which is still the highest grossing traditionally animated film to date. Of course they've had huge misses in the past like Chicken Little, but they still overall are good, and those feelings about such films resonated with the likes of Zootopia and the success it initially got. One that transferred a lot overseas for some reason, with a growing brand that started out to get its own theme park attractions, and another sequel that is yet to come, and one that is hopeful for what they can do, but also iffy in the Disney canon history, where you really have to talk about the themes of this movie and what they were attempting to do, and what also many other people have applied to it, where what they tried to do was still good and a message that can translate across all audiences, but one that still can cause problems with how one can see it as is, problems that we obviously have to discuss today, and how the film will be perceived upon growing generations and when it was first released. And this isn't to say that this video is to be fully criticizing it at all, and more of just a discussing how it applies in both a good or bad way, and how the broader picture has been narrowed into something else, where sometimes, especially in the realm of entertainment, you have to be careful about how something is conveyed, where it can be taken in the wrong context, including the usage of animals taking our very roles in society. This is where the concept of the predators and prey come into play and is devoted, within the idea that the city of Zootopia is where all mammals coexist together, all created equal within this utopia, just like how modern cities are diverse with many groups of people, and what you can try to do with a bunny rabbit and a fox working together as partners despite being creatures big or small and predator and prey, where Zootopia's big problem is actually our own and how we tend to look at things with a minor detail rather than its overall picture. To be honest with you, talking about this does seem a bit overblown to a level that doesn't really focus on what the true value of the movie is supposed to bring. That again, it's not meant to be analyzed in a way that can be construed specifically about something like race or whatever you say, but more about the broader problem of prejudice in our society, and how looking at it in that way will make more sense and what a person can do, how someone acts and what they're meant for. Because when you look back on most stories, there are kind of allegories about certain events or ideas, but again how these stories are mainly for the journey of one character, the hero that Judy is in fact representing, that we should never take away the true story but also recognize the problems with the world around them to get them to that point. The one where you have also noticed that I've avoided saying the word that most people bring up with the problem that this film is, being racism up until this point, as the true failure of this very film. The race allegory of this society that doesn't work well through its main character and what that applies to, that it's wrong to say X is Y and why you can't really enjoy this film. That the broad nature of the prejudice themes does not actually play well into either side if one person thinks it validates something they believe in. The assumption that you can make this animal just like this race or any other specific group of people is just plain wrong, especially when talking about predators and prey which cannot coexist together in harmony if we know how real life works, because it just doesn't. But then again, you really have to understand the other perspectives that they are trying to put in, where the directors were normal humans being bullied when they were young and using that perspective to put into the story and applying that same judgment with other characters like young Judy and the prejudice these foxes showed us until they all grew up together to find their actual very roles in life and apologize for the mistakes of such a foolish viewpoint. One that affects your own viewpoint if you understand what that means, where it just seems too conflicting to tell what it could be when you realize the ills of the world and what that applies to this very bunny. But to say that this movie is terrible for kids or its message will not translate well in the future just does not seem fully right either, when the heart of the movie actually teaches something that is universally important, even if one might think that the equation of predators does not make sense. Like when you start to look at it at certain different lens, like the lens of the adult versus what the kid sees of what this theme is really about, it tends to look much more differently, as I said before, with the focus of the hero's journey to be better, and the world that surrounds them, moments of utter importance either big or small. And speaking of small like Bellwether, those types of moments just aren't really the best because they don't work either because of how little is involved with that plot. The message and the path the plot takes seems to be muddled to even focus or accept it, from an era that was riddled with a constant line of similar shocking twist villains that just had to exist and had no right to be there in the first place when the obvious answers were actually hidden in the very films. How there is an angle that certain characters do not fit the billing even in films like Zootopia that has that important message, but how they are overshadowed by trying to tell something important about implicit bias and what that can mean for you and me. Like when you actually understand it, the words of predator and prey can actually be categorized in so many different ways beyond just regarded big or small, even though some small seem to have no problem except for Judy and then Bellwether again, who actually has that power but nobody cares for much until the very end of the film, or the other ways that could mean much more like racism, sexism, classism, or any type of thing that any person has an opinion about. All through the idea of putting people in a box because of what they look like and what they do, what their background is in this view of another person's personal taste, where it does not need to be about that if we regard what these statements truly are, using the animal kingdom to represent a personality rather than a specific color or creed you abide by. It doesn't have to be about this one thing or racism like most people try to put one to one, where yes, it is clear that many statements are construed in that way that pertains to something specific like a person's race or a statement that most people actually regard that is hateful, but how that is brought into every situation one kid or adult may come across in their very lives. The adversity one might face for being the way that they are and the way that they solve things like our hero Judy, like others' perception about her or her own perception about others. Because thinking about it more and more, it's good that we can talk about this in both ways, criticizing it and liking the movie, because that's what it's all about. To speak on what needs to be said or addressed in this world that has good and bad, and to strive to be good and better as we go along. That this film has so much going on for it to be taken seriously enough for certain people, and why it's understandable to that degree about why it's such a big problem. Where the big issue is that it probably should have been more subtle with every interaction they face instead of being actually in your face, as we do want the movie to focus on the buddy cop relationship of Nick and Judy and getting around an individual story. I mean, the city and theme of Zootopia really does feel like a melting pot that it should be. Lots of things going for it, like what we think America is supposed to be, having so many unique individuals coming together in one, similar to cities like New York City. So much to tell to truly be derived from, and why people actually hate it, or like it if you think about it. It's just how it's the same inside and out of the movie and the real world, where it applies to what happens and what can shape their path forward. If this is what really people think about me specifically, then why shouldn't I conform to that path instead of what I really want, as such characters like Nick understood? Where I guess again, the biggest problem that I really wanted to talk about here is how most of us can feel about a movie in either two ways, especially this one. A constant back and forth motion of feeling to say what this is about and what this thing is or what that thing is, and what we can do to bring ourselves forward from that very emotion, and how this can seem very specific through a diverse selection of creatures that might seem bad, but it's actually good if we understand what that message truly is. That we should never lose sight of the positive aspects that it brings, that it's still good, but also muddled in a world that constantly shifts in opinion since the dawn of our own existence, where everyone in this world is tainted by the certain vices and biases that divides us rather than unites us. And sometimes we just need to take a step back to realize what is actually going on in our own hearts to discover the truth of what that actually surrounds. Where what I've noticed greatly, especially while trying to make this review and understanding myself, is how I'm beginning to look at things in a different way, especially this movie. How am I trying to actually look at this movie despite its problems that I may have noticed in the beginning, and what others I've noticed in the past say here on YouTube. That I sometimes truly see the bad of the movie in a wrong way that actually applies in a different form, but how that is also a great strong suit to reflect on myself and what I believe in. All of which is just like Judy in the film, understanding and apologizing for her own actions and the actions of others. That we ourselves are the big problem, trying to actually attach a certain one-to-one theme to it that holds more weight to it, with its either race, disability, gender, size, or anything in between that the animal kingdom can represent so well on its own. And again, this was something that was just hard for me to make because of my own understanding about things that differ from others, how we can apply what this movie means in a bad or good way, trying to shelter myself to see the world in a better light than what it could be when it's not, and how the other videos you've seen on this show otherwise of what that could actually say. Where to be honest with you, I'm just not very smart enough to talk about this clearly, since I really can't know every person on this planet or experiences that are talked about in some way, just like Zootopia, and the multiple levels that it could say about our own lives. That change always starts with you and me, to look beyond what idea or perceived metaphor this entire thing was going for, to be what the message of the city strives to really look at and overcome any hateful obstacle that blocks us for who we are meant for in this very life. Zootopia is not the best film by any means, not even close to touching my favorites by far, but it certainly isn't terrible at all, nor bad, and still a good one with a great diverse range of characters that strive to be better like our own selves. We may not like some of the actions they take, or how some things are actually shaped, being fairly poor with those messages and how it applies to us as real life, but how this broader message actually stays true to who we can be if we let our hearts wide open to enjoy each other. And if that's what we can actually take away from this entire film, then Zootopia will endure for the great generations to follow us. And I'm all done, so goodbye.